I just got to tell you what, you are a sweet church family, because it seems like every time I'm speaking, or even when I'm not speaking, you're like, today I was expecting an OMA update. And, it's like, I'm sorry, I cannot work OMA into every sermon, my friends, But thank you for thinking of her. She is Renee's 96-year-old grandma with dementia who lived with us for a good year and a half. Then when she took a fall and turned for the worse and is, just trying to get surgery and rehab and all that kind of stuff, the doctors didn't know that she was going to be around much longer, but we said, well, then we want her back with us. And so she's been back with us for the past a month or two. And I don't know. I don't know if the doctors are right, because she just keeps on improving and keeps on ticking. And she's immobile, but she is. I even saw her yesterday. She's like moving her leg, like And she's gonna be back on her feet, I have a feeling. So, but thank you for all your prayers and your love for Oma. Her German genes, they just keep her ticking along. So today we are going to be starting into Luke's gospel, and Luke is all about the love. Luke is a Gentile doctor who seems fascinated with Jesus' love for people. And he structures his gospel around memorable meals and gatherings where Jesus always seems to find himself with a person or people who are considered outcasts by the rest of society. And it's all to demonstrate time and time again that nothing stands in the way between Jesus and people. He just loves people. So the first one of these that we're going to look at is in chapter 5 of the Gospel of Luke. So go ahead and find your way to Luke in chapter 5. And as you're getting there, to this one about this gathering that's happening in the beginning of Jesus' ministry, you kind of flip back to chapter 3 and to kind of appreciate kind of how Jesus' ministry kind of got started and kind of where we're at. And so in chapter 3, if you like the pictures, last message, where I kind of just shared with you some pictures from my own trip to Israel that I got to do this last year. Great. I've got some more. If you didn't like it, forgive me, because I'm about ready to Bible geek out on you some more. But Luke chapter 3, Jesus gets baptized in the Jordan. I got to go to the spot along the Jordan where Jesus probably got baptized. I couldn't help it. I went ahead and even got baptized again. I was like, I'm in the water. Third time's a charm, my friends. So, So that was really, really cool. You can't be there and not. So then, and then as you go further into beyond that, then he goes off to be tempted by the devil. And this is called the Mount of Temptation. It's outside of Old Jericho, and many believe that this is the place where he was tempted by the devil. And hey, I was tempted by the $5 camel ride. I had to have it, so that was good times. Can't pass that up. Then Jesus then heads from there to Nazareth, and he is there in the synagogue of Nazareth, and he preaches there, and pretty soon he says something that they don't like, and so they actually take him up to the highest point in Nazareth. They call it now Mount Precipice. So they believe that maybe they took him up this high, and that was a long way. That's a long fall down. So wanted to push him over, but he was like coming through the crowd saying, "Not today, gentlemen." And so then he goes on, since he's rejected in Nazareth, he ends up in Capernaum. Capernaum is right on the Sea of Galilee. What you see here is the basalt stone, the black stone. That's from the time of Jesus. Now this synagogue right here was built in Byzantine times, but if you look here at the base of the synagogue, it's built on this other base of the basalt stone. That's the synagogue that Jesus in Capernaum would have taught at and done miracles in, ministry from there in that hub, in that area. And this is kind of the neighborhood outside of it, so you kind of get that picture of what that looked like. And there at Capernaum, Jesus heals his Peter's mother-in-law, and we got to go into the ruins of Capernaum. And in fact, they believe that this right here is Peter's house right here. It's one of the largest in Capernaum. And then he goes to the Sea of Galilee, which is right there, and he calls many of his disciples to follow him. Got to hang out at the Sea of Galilee. That was cool. And then in Luke chapter 5, as we're getting there, he's performing more miracles in the surrounding towns around Capernaum. And in fact, we got to go some other towns, and it's just littered. The landscape is littered with first century, just artifacts and different things. And so it was just really, really, really cool. And so today we get, kind of later, chapter 5, he is performing so many miracles in the surrounding towns that when he comes back to Capernaum, he's so popular that people come from the outer towns, even as far as Jerusalem. They're coming to Capernaum to hear him, to be healed by him. And so today's story then happens there in 5, verse 17 and on. Jesus is in Capernaum and probably here at Peter's house. And he's teaching. It's crowded. Inside the house, outside the house, out into the streets and neighborhoods. It's just crowded. And we get to see something in this story that impresses and inspires Jesus more than anything, and that is this thing called faith. Faith is the ability to see through. Hebrews 11:1 gives us the definition of faith, that faith is the confidence that what we hope for will actually happen. It gives us the assurance that what we cannot see, about the things that we cannot see, that they really are. Faith is seeing, but since things are not always as they are seen, true faith sees through what happens, what seems to be, to what really is. And here in this story, faith, we see, becomes front and center. And so the first thing that we are going to learn about faith is that faith sees through the obstacles to the solutions. So let's just start out there in verse 17. One day while Jesus was teaching, some Pharisees and teachers of the religious law were also sitting nearby. It seemed by outward appearance that these men, these important men, just happened to show up from every village in all Galilee and Judea, as well as from Jerusalem. It's kind of suspicious, kind of fishy. Have you ever been in a meeting and a bunch of the bosses and authorities, they all just happen to show up and sit in on the meeting? And you're putting, things together and going, uh-oh, what's going on? What's really going on? What's coming, Because they were actually, what was really going on was they were getting worried about Jesus, and they were really starting to go, what are we going to do with this guy? And how can we get him back in line? It says that the Lord's healing power was strongly with Jesus. He had been healing many people out in the towns and in this town and other towns. And not just a few, but there was lots of healings going on. And so the word was out, if you need a healing, you got to get yourself to Jesus, because he's got the best odds around, for you getting healed. And so some men came wanting and needing a healing. They were wanting and needing a miracle, but not for themselves. They came carrying a paralyzed man on a sleeping mat, on the mat which he would lie on. And carrying this paralyzed man, that's not easy stuff. I know, because if you want another Oma update, I just got to tell you, since her fall, she has been immobile. So we have to use this sling-like mat attached to a then crank, lift to get her back and forth between just the bed to the wheelchair and the wheelchair back to the bed. It's a pain for my back. It's a pain to try to even figure out. It's a pain for her, because the first 30 minutes after she's transported, just those few inches, She's like, she won't drink, she won't eat, she won't watch TV. She just has her eyes closed, and she is exhausted from just that little bit of movement. But it's worth it to have her out and about with us. She's worth it. She's our Oma. Well, these friends thought that their immobile friend was worth it. And that's why later Jesus would be really impressed by this man and his friends, because what they did was unique. You see, in the ancient world, there wasn't this strong sense of social justice that you see in today's world that we kind of just take for granted. There wasn't this sense of compassion for the weak, service to help the one in need, like you will often find in today's world. In the ancient world, if you were sick, diseased, widowed, divorced, abandoned, maimed, scarred, orphaned, disabled, or any other label of imperfection, the thought was that you did something to deserve it. And so you are at present being punished, even by God or by the gods. And if I were to have compassion on you or try to intervene and help you, I could either catch what you have, be guilty by association with you, or I could actually be interfering with God's will or the God's punishment for you. So in such an understanding in the ancient world, people just learned to just kind of look out for their own and be a little bit suspicious and wary of any thought or feeling or gesture to help someone, especially someone who can't help back. So you think about, well, what is it that changed in the world between then and today? Where, if you think about it, much of our world and even our institutions today actually revolve around the caring for the sick and the homeless and the elderly and the orphan and the widow and on and on. And I would argue that Jesus' life and Jesus' teachings is what happened. The growth of his church in this world is what happened. You see, hospitals and nursing homes and orphanages and adoptions and sponsorships and homeless shelters and rehab programs for addicts and prisoners and more. The list goes on and on. They're not a pre-Jesus thing. Those are a post-Jesus thing. So the fact that these men were even carrying the paralytic man in the first place and try to get him to Jesus, not for their own good, but for his good, putting his welfare before their own, that was not a common thing. It was not a common notion. So it's no wonder that their efforts end up impressing Jesus later on in the story. Their faith saw past the obstacles of their ancient worldview blinders. And their faith saw through to a new kind of compassion that Jesus had been preaching about and starting to teach about, where it's for getting real people the real solutions that they really need. And their solution was Jesus. We love you, man. We just got to get you to Jesus. That was faith.